everyone. Thank you for coming to our Traffic Council meeting for September 28th. We'll begin with introductions. My name is David Kozis. I'm the Transportation Coordinator for the city's Department of Public Works. At the beginning of the meeting, I see for the Traffic Council members, we have Captain Doucette from the Traffic Bureau, Isaac Prezant, our traffic engineer from DPW. I see Mitch Fishman, he's our citizen representative. I don't see a counselor. Danielle, do you know if we're expecting Counselor Downs or Bowman or Markowitz?
I don't know.
Okay, so one of the counselors may be joining us. And then we have Danielle Delaney from the clerk's office. I also see Counselor Humphrey from Ward 5 at the beginning of the meeting. And I think that's...
I'm here too, David.
Okay.
Jeremy's here.
Jeremy, I didn't see you. Jeremy is here. Jeremy Freudberg, our alternate citizen rep. I still don't see you. I'm sure I heard your voice. Oh, there you are. I see you now. Okay, so we'll begin with our first item of the evening. I'm going to read the item into the record. We'll have a very brief presentation for the first couple items. So our first item of the evening is TC 4423. It's David Kozis, Traffic Council Chair, requesting to remove the accessible parking space at 35 Brookdale Road from the TPR, as it may no longer be needed. I'm going to open the next two items also. So TC 4623, David Kozis, Traffic Council Chair, requesting to remove the accessible parking space at 21 Gardner Street from the TPR, as it may no longer be needed. And TC 4523, David Kozis, Traffic Council Chair, requesting to remove the accessible parking space at 62 Bourne Street from the TPR, as it may no longer be needed. So for these first three items, the first one being TC 4423, these are accessible parking spaces that had been posted on in different areas, which every once in a while we do a survey. I've been working with Danielle in the clerk's office, who's on the call, to do a survey of the nearby residents to see if these accessible parking spaces are still being used by the residents nearby. And many of them, we heard back that they are still being used, and so they're not on the agenda. Only when we hear that specifically that they're no longer needed do we put them on the Traffic Council agenda, have a public discussion, and then vote either to keep them or to remove them. So for this first one at 35 Brookdale Road, we have heard from the nearby residents that parking space is no longer needed, and our recommendation, or at least an option at this point, is to remove that space from our traffic and parking regulations and to remove the sign. So at this point, we did notify again the residents nearby to 35 Brookdale Road. Is there anyone here who would like to make a public comment before we vote? If you would like to comment, if you could raise your hand and we'll call on you. And Isaac, if you can also help me take a look. I don't see anyone.
Yeah, I don't either.
No.
Okay, so then I'm going to make a motion to, I would have the language in our draft TPR. This would be TPR 897, right? That's where we're starting, Danielle?
Correct.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to remove that accessible parking space from our traffic and parking regulations. Any last comments? Okay, Danielle, can you call the roll, please?
Yes. Mr. Fishman.
Aye.
Captain Doucette.
Aye.
Mr. Kozis.
Aye.
And Mr. Prezant.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved 4-0.
Okay, so our process is that we will now wait for a 20-day appeals period, which will bring us to October 11th. If there's no appeal, after October 11th, that sign will be removed, and the entry will be removed from our traffic and parking regulations. Our next item is similar. We already entered it into the record. This is for 21 Gardner Street, same story. We've heard from the nearby residents that that accessible parking space is no longer being used. So I'll make the motion to remove that space as well. That would be TPR 898. Are there any comments before we call the roll? Okay. I don't see any. So Danielle, can you call the roll on this one, please?
Mr. Fishman,
Aye.
Captain Doucette,
Aye.
Mr. Kosis,
Aye.
and Mr. Prezant.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved 4-0.
Okay.
How can I do that? Okay.
Our next item, which we already read into the record, is TC 4523. This is for 62 Bourne Street. Same thing. We have heard that that space is no longer needed. And I will make a motion to remove that accessible space from the field and from our regulations. That would be a motion to approve TPR 899 for 62 Bourne Street. Any comments on this item? Okay. Danielle, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Fishman,
Aye.
Captain Doucette,
Aye.
Mr. Kosis,
Aye.
and Mr. Prezant.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved 4-0.
Okay, that was great. I think we have maybe 4 or 5 more that we'll be hearing at our next traffic council meeting for other spaces. But we're moving right along to our next item now, which is TC 3823. I just want to see if someone is on.
Mr. Summergrad is here.
Is he? Okay, that's what I was looking for. Good. Okay, so let me first read this into the record. It's TC 3823. It's Paul Summergrad, 37 Crystal Street, requesting a review of the parking regulations on Crystal Street and Newberry Street. Parking restrictions requested in this petition include prohibited parking on both sides of the street near the intersection of Crystal Street at Lake Avenue, as well as prohibited parking one side of the remainder of these streets between Memorial Day and Labor Day. Note the traffic council may approve or deny this request or may approve a different set of parking regulations. Mr. Summerguard, I know that you're on the call. Did you want to make a comment at the outset or should we do the presentation first?
Why don't you do the presentation? I assume that's your normal procedure, and then I'll be glad to add a comment, as I suspect some of my neighbors will as well.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you,
So this
sir.
will be a brief, yes. So this will be a brief presentation, then we'll take the public comment. Okay, so here's a map of the two of the streets that we're talking about. Crystal Street is the area shown in red. And you see the area near Lake Avenue where the island is located. And then we have Newberry Street shown in purple, which makes a sharp 90-degree turn. This is right near Crystal Lake. Here's a view looking from Lake Avenue to the island and beyond. This is looking to the north. Between that crosswalk and Newberry Street, it's very close. It's about 80 feet distance between the two. Now turning around and looking back at Lake Avenue, this is looking south where you see the island, and I just measured the distances. They're different distances depending on, where exactly you're standing. A couple more pictures. This is looking at Crystal Street to the north toward Beacon Street. It's a 23 or 24 foot wide street. Right now, there's parking allowed on both sides of the street. The utility poles are mostly on the east side and the fire hydrants are on the west side. So we take that into account later on in terms of what's the easiest way to post signage without putting new poles in the ground. Here's Newberry Street. This is looking to the west toward the curves around toward Beacon Street. This is a little bit narrower even. It's only 22 feet wide. Many of the streets in Newton are 24 feet wide, so this is a little bit less wide than many of the streets in the city, but parking is still allowed on both sides of Newberry Street. The utility poles are on the south side, and there wasn't a fire hydrant that I saw on this section of Newberry Street. And then after the curve looking toward the north, toward Beacon Street, here's the photo from that location. It winds out a little bit. It's 23 or 24 feet wide at that point. And again, parking is allowed on both sides. The utility poles here are on the west side. As the fire hydrant is also on the west side. You can see it in the image on the screen. So the request that came into us is actually exactly the same as what I'm recommending here. Again, right now there's no restrictions on either of these streets. We know that there's quite a lot of parking for Crystal Lake on these streets in the summer, and a concern for emergency vehicles to be able to get down the street, and trash and recycling vehicles. So the request that came to us first was a request for no parking on either side down near the triangle by Lake Avenue. That is what is being recommended here. Also, what was requested was a no parking restriction on one side of the street, the remainder of Crystal, and so that restriction would be between Memorial Day and Labor Day only, right? And then no restriction on the other side of the street, right? So between Labor Day and Memorial Day, parking could occur on both sides of the street, where there's a lot less parking that happens during the whole rest of the year. So that is the recommendation that I'm making. I think it's exactly what is consistent with what was requested and signed by the residents in the original petition. I think it'll make it a lot safer for the residents of the street to be able to get up and down their street, for the emergency vehicles to be able to get through. It's pretty typical that we restrict parking when it's very heavy, just to make sure safety is the primary concern. We also do want to allow access on a public street to the extent that we can. So that's the recommendation, and we do have language to allow us to vote to move forward. So this is just the technical language that we would be voting on to create these new regulations that you see on this slide. So that's the presentation. I'm going to open it up now for public comment. And if you have a comment on anything, if you could just raise your hand, and then we can call on you. And maybe, okay, so there's someone that's called iPad 6. Oh, Lori.
Did you want me to, Mr. Kozis? This is Paul Summergrad.
Did you want to start out by,
go ahead first. If I could just make a couple of brief comments as to why I brought this petition to my neighbors and then through them to you. And I appreciate your time and that of the Traffic Council. I've lived in Newton Center at Crystal Street since 1987 and have never thought or been worried about access to the neighborhood by emergency vehicles, either fire, police, certainly rescue vehicles, or actually I hadn't thought about the garbage trucks, but that's a really good point as well. And this is really about safety. It's not about people having access to Crystal Lake or where people should swim in Crystal Lake. But two things have happened in the last, I would say, 4 years or so that have changed the dynamics of this area in the way that you described. First is for reasons that are unrelated to this request, and again, not an issue that I or my neighbors have been bringing up, or that I didn't bring up in this petition. Parking was suspended on both sides of Laurel Street for all of the period of time from Memorial Day to Labor Day due to some issues that arose in the parking in that area. And then secondly, the use of the Cronin's Cove swimming area, the area that's not the city of Newton swimming area, that's around to the toward the Lake Avenue side towards Newton Highlands on Crystal Lake, has grown dramatically. It used to be that didn't occur very frequently. It now occurs very, very frequently, particularly with any days when we have warmer weather. And we've simply had circumstances where people are parked on both sides of the street, up and down Crystal, large portions of Newbury. And it makes it hard, even in smaller vehicles, to transit this. And as I discovered in talking with my neighbors, there are other issues that have come up as well. And they should speak to their own issues that have occurred with this. But my worry is simply, particularly now, I guess I've lived almost 38 years, 35 years in this area, 36 years. I'm now older, and I worry more about things like, ambulance access and fire and police access, but also these circumstances have materially changed. And so basically just worried about human life and access to this area during those months, and appreciate your and the Traffic Council taking this up as a docketed matter and consideration of this request. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Summergrad. And you are at 37 Crystal Street. So is that this house right here?
Yes, that's that house right there. Correct.
Okay. All right. So you would end up with no parking right in front of on one side of your house, and then on the Newbury side, it would be no parking between Memorial Day and Labor Day. You'd be able to park on the opposite side.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, I see that. Thank you again. I see we're joined by Councillor Downs from Ward 5, who's going to be a voting member tonight, and also Councillor Maliki from Ward 3. All right, so we're going to go to other people who have their hands raised. I see someone, I think it says iPad 6, Lori. If you could just say your name and your address, please, and unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm not sure if I'm doing this correctly, so I apologize if I'm not. I live, my name is Lori Collis, and I live at 15 Crystal Street, which is almost at the corner of Beacon and Crystals. And the issues are a little bit different this close to Beacon. It's a problem not just during the summer here, it's a problem all year round. There's a group home that's sort of diagonally across from my house that's on Beacon Street. And the people from the group home and lots of houses on the street have apartments that are full of students. And again, this is closer to Beacon Street. And they park really all the time, sort of 24/7, winter, summer, the whole time. Why this is a big problem for me, particularly, is I have a handicapped child who's on oxygen. And I spoke to the Mass Commission on Disabilities, and they came out and measured the street. Actually, I'm surprised they did that. They came out and measured the street, and they said that unless there's only parking on one side of the street all the time, that there's not an ambulance that can get down to help my child if she needed them. And I also should say, this is the house I grew up in. I've lived here forever. I'm old now too, and I've lived here forever. And it's just gotten worse and worse and worse. People park here and walk to Four Corners, they walk into town and that kind of thing, which will be fine, except the street is too narrow to do that. So my request would be, and of course it would be up to the other neighbors, if this would be a problem for them. But my request would be to consider one side of the street parking all the time, because it's not just a problem during the summer. Actually, in some ways, it's even worse during the year because all the students are back and the group home people, that adds probably an additional, I'd say at least 10 cars to our end of the street. And I just would have one other quick request, if this is something I can do, would be, I was in a part of Newton and they had signs saying that people couldn't park, but like closer than 5 feet to the driveway. And I wondered if that's something that could be considered. I have a small area between my house and the next door house that's too small for a car, but cars parked there. And I can't even get in and out, let alone an ambulance for my child getting in and out. She's also taken to a day program, and the van can't get down the street. The van can't get into the driveway. People park in my driveway all the time. And anyway, I'm sorry if I'm rambling on. That would just be, you know, if I'm doing this right, 2 additional things that would just help me and my daughter enormously. So thank you. And I appreciate what you're doing. Thank you so much.
So thank you very much for all of those comments. I'm going to try and respond to a couple of these. First of all, I hope you're aware that you could request an accessible space to be added in front of your home. You saw that we removed some in other parts of the city that aren't used anymore. But if you find that that would be a need for you, I would, might want to think about requesting through Traffic Council to add an accessible space if it's needed. That's one thing. In terms of the 5 foot from driveway, that is a city regulation, right? So that is a city ordinance. You can't park within 5 feet of a driveway anywhere in the entire city. It's just not on this one street. It's everywhere, and it's an ordinance that is heavily enforced. Our division actually handles the parking ticket hearings and parking ticket appeals, and we know that we see many tickets for parking within 5 feet of a driveway in this neighborhood, especially in the summer, but also throughout the city. So if someone is parking within 5 feet of your driveway and you want enforcement, you would just feel free to call the traffic bureau at 796-2106 and ask for enforcement. In terms of whether Traffic Council could consider expanding the recommended restriction so that it's not only between Memorial Day and Labor Day, but throughout the year, that is something that could be considered at this meeting. If the members of Traffic Council and the other neighbors might want to comment on it, we could approve that, or we could go with this regulation and see how it goes. It's just, it's just a parking regulation, and it's something that can be changed, at any time, just with a new item. If you maybe this would solve many of the problems if it doesn't go far enough, and if it's not considered tonight, maybe it's something that can be done later. We do tend to, at Traffic Council, put in the least restrictive measures first to see if it solves a problem. But again, we could consider expanding that to, one-sided parking at all times. All right. So
Thank
I
you.
see yes. So the next person with their hand up is Annie Madden.
Hi, I'm at 46 Newbury Street, and we have definitely been affected and agree with Paul's petition to, try to second from the big lot on the flat half.
Right here.
So I think the proposal sounds great. My only concern is the corner, actually, where Newbury makes the right turn. That is already a kind of sketchy corner and seems very narrow, and the visibility is very poor. And so I wonder if there should be no parking on that corner in front of the house there. So,
right.
But
so,
otherwise, I think that's great. Because
right.
I just, we come through that way and back the other way in and out of our street. And even now, if there's construction vehicles or whatever, it's hard to see.
Right. So again, right now, there's parking on both sides. You could have cars parked right across from each other. That might happen.
And that's very
regularly.
tricky. Yeah, when that happens. And in the summer, that happens more. So that's why I've seen that happen. But when cars are parked, especially on that side versus the other side, it's harder to see around the corner.
Right. So with this recommendation, of course, the parking would still be allowed on the, I guess I'll call it the inside of the elbow, right? But the whole outside would be free and, sort of open up the sight lines a little bit more.
Or you have to go swing into the other lane to get around the corner.
Right.
If you're coming from where we live.
Right.
So. Just
So
a thought.
this is like, so we're talking about this intersection, and we actually do have the administrative authority through Public Works to restrict parking up to 50 feet of an intersection based on engineering judgment. So even if we vote to allow parking on, on the whole inside of the elbow, if the traffic engineers go and say, we think that we need an additional, 50 feet and 50 more feet from this intersection, that could be done outside of the traffic council vote.
Okay.
Okay, and it could be done later or at any time, or if we
But
see
otherwise,
it becomes a problem.
Wholeheartedly in support of this.
Thank you for
So
that.
thank you for taking it into consideration.
Okay, and I need my glasses, I think. So I see Ken, but I can't see your last name. Is it Chiash?
Yeah, Chia.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you
Hi,
could say your address, please.
Yeah. My family and I, we live on 27 Crystal Street. We're Annie's and Paul's neighbor.
Okay, so is it right here on the corner?
Yes.
Okay.
So, I totally agree with what both Annie and Paul have said about the issue on the parking. Our concern is that, I would like to, for the no parking on Memorial and Labor Day to sort of extend on the Crystal Street on the front of our house, up to the front of our house, mainly because we've had a lot of issues, particularly the last couple of years. I've got 2 young kids, and I frequently get people changing right in front of my house, right in front of my kids. And, despite having conversations with them that maybe that's not an appropriate thing to do in front of young children, but we still get a lot of that. I think, and we get receptacles from drinks, alcohols, and whatnot stuffed in my hedges, during the summer. On top of that, I think you're addressing that with the parking restriction. But this year, for the first time, I had, the police. We had a hit and run right in front of our house due to the amount of traffic that's coming through. We had police knocking on door, canvassing, trying to get ring video recording of the hit and run. So, for most of the entire summer, it's virtually impossible for my kids to even ride around Newbury or Crystal Street because of the amount of traffic and the sort of speed and people trying to get in and find parking around there. So, I do think that, I'd like to see at least the no parking on Memorial to Labor Day extend at least up to the block on that, so that it just eases the congestion a little bit. And obviously, and my fellow neighbors have also said about the issue getting, emergency vehicles through. I think even the UPS truck has a tough time coming through during the summer as well. So those things are of a concern, but really the safety issues for my kids with people changing and tossing their receptacles around there, it's starting to get to be a nuisance as well.
Okay, thank you for that. A couple thoughts. Well, first of all, again, we have the administrative authority to restrict parking up to 50 feet from a corner, even if it's shown as no restriction on this map. So that would be, close to this corner as well. In terms of people changing, we've heard this before on other streets, right? We heard it on Laurel Street. That was one of the reasons that it ended up, being totally restricted, parking on Laurel Street on both sides, actually, in the summer. So we should all remember that we have a wonderful resource, a public resource here, and we are accommodating parking, but the more restricted it gets, I don't think it's going to prevent people from coming here. It's just going to push them further and further away. So really our primary concern is about safety and making sure that the emergency vehicles can get through, with the knowledge that the more restrictions we put in, the more we're pushing cars just a little further away from the lake. Okay, so I see Oh, are you Barry? Are you Barry Cohen? And you can unmute yourself if you are Barry. I know that we received I was going to sort of summarize your email into the record, but you're here. So why don't you go ahead? We need to know your address, please.
Well, you can do that if you want. But I guess I'll start. I'm Barry Cohen. I live at 2 Albion Place. My driveway is on Newberry Street. So if you look at the purple line, yeah, exactly. And I totally understand people's concerns about traffic. I think some of it is due to the construction of Livingston Cove this summer, pushing people who normally would enter the lake through that area to Cronin's Cove. So they all got pushed down to our end. But even on a good day, it's bad. But my concern is this map is accurate but incomplete. Albion Place, which is where my house is, and Albion Street, which is around the corner, is the end of this little community. So by not including Albion Place and Albion Street in what you're trying to accomplish, that's where you're kicking the can down the road. That's where they're going to end up parking. If you measure Albion Place, it is small. It's much smaller than Newberry Street. We have trouble getting the trash collected when there's one car on the side of the street. So if you're going to pursue this, I'm requesting that you don't stop at Newberry Street, but you include Albion Place and Albion Street in that as well. And that would take the full area as being parking only on one side of the street. After Albion Street is Walnut Street, which is a whole different part of Newton, so to speak. So I don't want to take the brunt of having half the parking eliminated during the summer and not being able to get out of my driveway. I already sometimes struggle getting out of my driveway because of how close cars park to all of the driveways. And when I pull out, I've got Albion Place to look at. I've got Albion Street from the east, and I've got Newberry Street from the east and Newberry Street from the north. So I got 3 places to look at just to get my car out of the driveway. So I'm asking that you consider doing something for those as well, so we don't all hit the full hit of it. But I do think that once Livingston Cove is open, if indeed there's access to the lake in that area like there had always been in the past, which I understand will be the case, although I haven't seen it yet, I think some of the traffic is going to shift back again. So it'll be more of a balancing out. So I'm asking you to consider not just what we've experienced in the short term, but what we may be experiencing down the road and all of the areas that are experiencing it, not just these streets in purple.
Okay, so thank you very much. So my comment for your comment, my response. So the item that was docketed originally, actually at the very beginning, it included, not only Crystal Street and Newberry Street, but also Newberry Terrace, which we ended up removing from this discussion because it's a private way, it's not a public way. So we could only vote on items that were docketed and the residents that were notified at this meeting. Okay. For Albion Place, I did notice that parking is allowed on both sides right now. We're sitting here in September, right? A long time from Memorial Day. I would suggest that you might want to consider talking to your neighbors about whether they are in agreement and would like to docket a petition for their street sometime in the next couple months, where we would be able to put it on an agenda if it's docketed correctly, do a full study like we did for this one, look at the width of the street, and invite everyone from that street to come to a meeting to see whether we should change the regulations on that street, maybe before Memorial Day. So that's something that I would suggest that you think about. Any other comments on this? I don't see any hands raised.
No.
So thank you all for your
No.
comments.
I have comments. My hand should be up.
Okay,
Yeah,
I didn't see your hand. Okay.
Oh, I had my
Okay.
hand up
There it is.
also.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I can't see everybody all at the same time. So, is your name Monty Stambler?
Stambler, right, yes. Yes, I'm at 117 Lake Ave, which is on the other side of Paul Summergrad's house, right at the very end of the map. And I just wanted to express concerns about public safety. And actually, can I do a screen share? I wanted to show some.
We're not able to do that, but
Okay, all right, well, the gist of it is, at the beginning of August, I made a left turn off Beacon Street onto Crystal, something I do every day practically. And, both sides of the street are parked up. I have a photo that shows when both sides are parked up, the diameter of the available street is about 10 feet. As I came around the corner, a woman who was parked on the green side here, on the right-hand side, opened her door, and we had a collision that totaled both cars. I mean, not total, but put both cars totally out of commission. I was not at fault, and I think she, the street. I had just come around the corner. I think she probably looked in her rearview mirror to see if things were clear, and then looked back at her dashboard to turn the car off. And that maybe in about 3 seconds, traveling at a reasonable rate of speed, that's all it took for me to get to where her door was. So, and she opened her door right into my car, bam. So I think this is a corridor is so narrow. The other thing is that the behavior of people who have come to swim is very unpredictable and erratic. There are children, there are people with surfboards, all kinds of bizarre blowable, uppable things. And it's a real public safety issue just to drive down that street and not run somebody over. So I'm concerned about that, that even removing one side will still make it tight. So pedestrian safety and bicyclists, another one. There are 10 feet, it isn't even enough for a car and a bicycle to pass each other. So pedestrian safety is at risk. That's my whole comment.
thank you for your comment. Susan iPad, did you have a comment? I can't tell. It looks like you're raising your hand, but you're muted.
Oops, hold on one. Am I still muted right now?
Now you're unmuted.
Oh, okay,
We can
great.
hear you.
Yes, I
And we just
live
need
at,
to know your name and your address, please.
yeah, Susan, Susan Foner, Foner. And I live at 45 Newbury Street, next door to Paul, and directly across from Annie and Ken, and a couple of houses away from, yeah. So anyway,
Yeah.
from Barry. So I am in total agreement. I mean, the neighborhood has become like a resort area now in the summers. I call it the Newton Center Resort because of all the cars. The only concern I have is that some people have more space in their driveways than others. I'm totally on board with the one side parking because the streets are too narrow. But I know like Annie has a 2-car driveway. I'm just concerned a little bit about guests. If we might have people who come over the summer, because with Laurel Street with no parking, And then with the one side parking for the rest of the area, I just don't know if our guests or visitors would have any place to park during these days. That's my only concern. I know next door to Annie, they only have a 2-car driveway as well, like a tandem driveway. So sometimes we need to have some street parking for our own. So I don't know if there's a way to do resident parking or anything like that to add to the mix.
Well, the recommendation I guess my response would be that we still have no restriction, on one whole side of the street, right? So that means anybody could park there. All the residents could park there. I suppose if you know that you're having guests over, this is what I do. I live in Newton also. So, sometimes I would just, if I know I'm having a guest over, I would just put my car on the street. I could park my car. I don't have a restriction, and then make my driveway available for my guests. So that's something that you might want to consider doing. The whole rest of the year, parking would be available on both sides unless there's an interest and a vote to restrict parking, year round on the one side shown in purple.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's just that it's, again, squeezing all of these cars that now are on both sides. It just is going to, the cars have to go somewhere. So they might come earlier. It might be, anyway, I just wanted to add that.
And I know a lot of the cars they're all over the place. They're on the other side of Beacon Street, right? On Crystal Street, or on, just across Beacon Street on I forget the name of the street right across, but so
Hancock, yes, Hancock.
That's it. That's exactly it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So
but I think for safety it is necessary to do the one side parking. I agree with that.
That's right. That's our primary concern here at Traffic Council. It's not about enforcement or behaviors or something. It's really about safety for the residents.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
Other comments? Thank you. Any other comments on this? Okay, so again, thank you all for your comments. Members of Traffic Council or city councilors that are here, any thoughts? This slide shows the recommendation and what we have prepared to vote on if we want to.
Yeah, David, this is Isaac here. Personally, I'm definitely in support of the language that we've prepared. I think it's a good first step as an iterative approach. We definitely can look at administrative restrictions around intersections. We can sort of see how that all comes together should this be approved and signs be implemented. So I agree with what you said earlier, maybe taking the less restrictive approach first, and we can always come back. I think the person who had the strongest argument for removing parking on one side all the time happened to also perhaps be a good candidate for an accessible parking space. So maybe that solves their issue if that's something they can pursue. So
right,
yeah.
and I think that would be on. I believe it's this house. So the space
exactly.
could go right in front of their home.
Yeah. So I'm supportive of the language we have now so far, and definitely happy to have a future discussion again.
Thank you, Isaac. Mitch, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just, I'm definitely in favor of the petition. The only thing I noticed when I was on Crystal Street the other day is I almost got run off the road by a FedEx truck that was going at about 50 miles an hour. And I was thinking it's a real straightaway, and maybe some signage or, I guess traffic enforcement. Again, it hasn't come up, but, with one side during the season without cars, would seem that maybe some kind of action like that would be appropriate, but I know we don't do that.
Thank you, Mitch. Councilor Downs.
Thank you. Sorry I was late. We have done this in a number of streets, and I will be supporting this. However, given Mitch's comment, and this is something to think about more globally as we go about restricting parking on more streets that with our increasingly large cars are too small for safety. And that is whether we shouldn't alternate the sides to make it just a little harder to speed in that one lane because it's not straight. But it's something that I'm not going to ask for tonight. I just want to put that out in the other is an idea for traffic calming, as long as we're removing some parking.
Thank you, Councilor Downs. Anyone else? Would anyone like to make a motion, or I can make a motion to?
I'll make the motion.
Yes, go ahead, Councilor Downs.
I'll make the motion to approve the docketed item with the language in green on the screen.
Okay, so we have a motion made by Councilor Downs. This would be to approve the language of TPR 900 to restrict parking as we showed on the previous slide. Danielle, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Fishman,
Aye.
Captain Doucette,
Aye.
Mr. Kosis,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
and Councilor Downs.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved 5-0, TPR 900.
Okay, very good. So we are now at the point where it's been approved and we're in the 90-day appeals period. So if we don't hear an appeal, then sometime after October 11th, we should see the signs going in that restrict parking in the areas shown in red at all times and the areas shown in purple between Memorial Day and Labor Day. And I anticipate we might be getting another traffic council docket to look at Albion Place as well sometime before Memorial Day. Thank you all. And we're going to move on to our next item. Okay, so our next one is TC 3923. This is Jody Detchen, 127 Allerton Road, on behalf of Allerton Road abutters, requesting to change the parking regulations on Allerton Road by adding a resident permit exception to the existing posted parking regulations on the east side of Allerton Road. Okay. So here's a map that shows Allerton Road, sort of two different sides. There's the Allerton Road to the west of Center Street, this segment, and then the Allerton Road to the east of Center Street. I think there's sort of two different issues here. So this is Allerton Road looking from Rogers Street to the west. It's 23 or 24 feet wide. And then looking to the east from Allerton Road, 24 feet wide. Then if you go to the other side of Center Street and look to the east, this is the image from there. It's 23 or 24 feet wide at that location. So if you look at the existing parking regulations on Allerton Road, this is right from our traffic and parking this is what is shown in our traffic and parking regulations, that parking is prohibited. Well, they call it the west side. I'm going to be calling it the north side, right? So the area shown in red, no parking anytime. The area shown in orange is a 2-hour limit, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Actually, in the regulations, if you look at the regulations, this restriction on the books starts at Cushing Street and goes up to about this point, okay? Then we have another regulation, which is no parking on the south side of Allerton. This is this purple area from Center Street to what says in the TPR Rowena Road, which is not actually Rowena Road, and we're going to fix that as well. There's a couple of things we're going to be fixing along the way, in addition to changing things. So this little section right here, if you go and look at it, it actually does have signs that say that it's a 2-hour limit between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. Everybody probably thinks that that's what the regulations are. On the books, it's not the case. On the books, officially, there's no restriction right now on this block, which this is another thing we're gonna be able to address. On the books and in the field, there's no restriction in these areas shown with the black arrows. The north side here and the south side on this little stretch right here. Okay, so our recommendation, again, it's really exactly what was requested by the residents and what was signed on the traffic council petition form. The recommendation is to continue with the no parking on the north side from Hyde Street to Center Street as it is now. And the recommendation would be to keep the 2-hour limit on the south side from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. So officially adding this into the books as a restriction, and actually all the way to Center Street, a 2-hour limit, but adding in the resident permit. So if you're a resident who lives on this block or on this block, if you're anywhere abut any of these homes that abut Allerton, between Hyde and Center Street, you would be able to get a permit from the traffic bureau. It's a $25 sticker that you can stick on your car. Or right now, you could get 2 free visitor permits, maybe instead, or as you know, in addition to the $25 sticker. The visitor permits, though, they're not stickers, they're transferable placards. You have to remember to put it, on your dash if you're going to park for more than 2 hours. So this is what is being requested by the residents, so they don't get tickets, so they're able to park on their street for more than 2 hours, and that's what's being recommended. And then no change at all to the area to the east of Center Street, except fixing it to be from Center Street to Harewood Road instead of Rowena. And then, no parking on the north side of those 2 blocks. That's no change from what we have today. So that's what I am recommending.
David, can I just clarify something on that last map?
Yeah.
Your map says no parking and then no parking restrictions. So would it be no parking or no restrictions? In other words, unlimited parking?
I'm trying to go back, but my
you keep going forward.
Seems to only be going forward. I don't know why.
Yeah.
My back arrow is not working. I think I'm going to try and end this and reshare and see if that fixes it. Okay, I'm going to try and share that again. Is it going back? Yeah. Okay, good. I don't know what happened there. Okay, way back here. Okay, I think this is where we're supposed to be. Okay, Councilor Downs.
Yeah, that's exact. So that little bit in black. No parking restrictions or no parking? No change.
No parking restrictions. So
okay, that's all I wanted to figure out. It's just in reading it initially, I was like,
I think no for parking? This block, so like for the area closer to Crystal Lake, I'm sure that the restrictions were in place because of Crystal Lake, right?
I think it's also because of the T.
Right, maybe even the T. I think the area to the east of Center Street, those restrictions, if I remember, they're just Memorial to Labor Day. It had to do with too many cars parked during soccer games on the field there. Right, so still allow it, but no I guess there's no reason to have resident permits on that side because that whole side is not restricted anyway.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. Okay. So that's our recommendation to basically to approve what was being requested. We have the language where we would be removing the current regulations and adding back a new set of regulations, which are just a couple fixes. It's the north side and the south side. We're making sure that we're saying Harewood Road instead of Rowena, making sure we're saying that the restriction starts at Hyde Street, and most importantly, we're adding this thing this little section right here that says except by resident permit. All right, so that's the language that would allow us to create this map in the field. So that's the presentation. I'm going to open it up now for public comment. If anyone wants to speak, if you could raise your hand or try and wave, and then we can call on you. And I'm just looking to see if I see anyone who wishes to speak.
I don't see anyone, David.
I don't see anyone either. Everyone was notified on the entire street of this meeting. I don't think we received any emails about this item.
0.
Right. But we did get the original petition that was signed by the residents, and we are recommending exactly what was requested. So I guess I'll just go ahead and make a motion to approve TPR 901, which is the language that we see on slides 26 and 27, to create this map that we see on slide 25. And so I'll make that into a motion. And does anyone have any comments before we call the roll?
I just think this makes good sense. As someone who uses the lake and uses Allerton Road, it seems to me that folks ought to have a way to park near their house if they want.
Yeah, this seems to be something that we're doing sort of recently, and we're seeing it more and more every traffic council meeting, where we have a long-standing restriction that is like a 2-hour or a 1-hour or something that, you know, interferes with people's ability to use their street, where we're now overlaying, sort of keeping that in place, right? So that we still have some public use of the street, of a public street, and overlaying a resident permit program for residents of the street. It adds, you know, it does add work to the traffic bureau, right? Because now we're just keep adding streets where people would be coming to get the permits and, you know, more to keep track of. But I think it's a very good benefit for the people who live on the street to have access to park there. So I think that we're just going to be seeing more and more of this. We actually have another one coming in this meeting for another street that we'll get to with the same exact situation. Right. Okay. Any other comments for the motion that was made to approve TPR 901? Okay, seeing none. Danielle, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Fishman,
Aye.
Captain Doucette,
Aye.
Mr. Kosis,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
Counselor Downs.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved 5-0, TPR 901.
Okay, so Danielle, do you remember that after the last meeting, we all decided that we were going, after the appeals period, October 11th, if there's no appeal, we were going to send out a letter to the residents who now would be having access to resident parking. And we did that once already. I forget which it was. So this will be the next one that we're going to do. We have the letter. I'll help you with, you know, I'll send you that information to send out to all the abutters so that they know after October 11th, and then really when the signs are changed, that's their cue to go to the traffic bureau to get their permits or their stickers. Right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Okay, great. Great. So we can move on to the next item then. So this is TC 4123. It's Councilor Maliki requesting to create a 4-way stop-controlled intersection on Watertown Street at the intersection of Elliott Avenue and Eddy Street to improve safety. Note that a permanent 4-way stop at this intersection will require the removal of the rectangular rapid flashing beacon, which was installed on Watertown Street at this intersection. Okay, so for this presentation, I'm just going to start out with the easy slides, and then I'm going to pass it on over to Isaac to get into the much more complicated engineering slides. Okay, so here's the location, Watertown Street at Eddy and Elliott. We have several photos. This is the view of Watertown Street looking to the east from Eddy Street and Elliott Avenue, right? And then this is turning around and looking down toward West Newton. So Eddy Street would be on your left, Elliott Avenue would be on your right. Here is a view of Elliott Street looking to the north toward Watertown Street. There's a stop sign here. And then from in the opposite direction, Elliott Avenue looking toward the south. You have Watertown Street, and then, you know, down toward Washington Street. So a lot of analysis was conducted, and I'm gonna turn it over now, thank goodness, to Isaac. And if you could sort of go through the next couple of slides, just let me know when you would like me to move on to the next slide, okay?
Sure. David, for the record, I'm sure you could have made your way through it if I wasn't here, but I'm happy to do it. Hey everyone. So we put together a few slides just because this one was a big topic of discussion, and there was a very high level analysis that went into it. So we're hoping to just sort of break it down into a few different talking points. We have put together a memo that sort of has the lengthy look at all of this, but like I said, we'll sort of flip through the highlights of it. Over the next few slides, you're going to see just some raw data, essentially. It's going to be turning movement counts. Those were conducted on a specific date for 14 hours. Turning movement counts being sort of exactly what it sounds like. It's a recorder that collects every single vehicle that moves through the intersection and what turn or movement it makes. Then we had automatic traffic recorder counts conducted around that same time. Those were conducted for 48 hours. Those are really just a roadway segment analysis that's collecting vehicle volume and speed. Of course, we wanted to accumulate data for all the crashes. We typically look at full calendar years when it comes to analysis, but we did note some extra crashes as well that are more recent in 2023. And before we get into it, DPW's analysis and really referencing, the regulations that we have at our disposal and the guidances. We're recommending a multi-way stop and all-way stop, but we'll get into some of the more nitty-gritty details over the next few slides. So David, go ahead. Very good. So this slide and the next, I won't stop on it for too long, but of course we can go back to it and we can make the memo available in the future. But this is just the raw data. This is the AM peak hour. It was recorded to be between 7:45 and 8:45 AM over here. This shows vehicles, bicycles, and pedestrian crossing volumes. Let's go ahead. And really the only difference with this one is this is just the PM peak hour, and that happened to be 4:15 to 5:15. You can keep going. On this slide, this is just a few of the locations where the ATRs were conducted. Again, this is just vehicle volume and speeds. Nothing to really highlight on here for this purpose, but just wanted to note that we have that data. And we can go back to this slide if needed during our discussion later. Crash data, really for the point of analysis, we do want to take full calendar years. It just sort of makes it easier, but this one does also have 6 crashes that have occurred so far in 2023. You can keep going.
Right. So 2023 is not shown here. This is showing the number of crashes every year from 2018 to 2022, right? Between 2
exactly.
and 5 crashes.
Yeah.
And how many did you say were from this year so far?
This year so far there have been 6.
Okay, so even more than any other time in the past couple of years.
Correct. And the overwhelming majority of them are angle collisions. Often angle collisions are vehicles coming from 2 different streets. Some of the other details aren't too necessary for the analysis itself, but really just focusing on the sheer number of crashes is sort of good for our purposes for now. You can go ahead. part of the memo, and I don't want to spend too much time on it today, but just to, again, like as a quick highlight, we did evaluate a traffic signal. So the manual on uniform traffic control devices, that's a national regulation. That gets into 8 different warrants for traffic signals. In Massachusetts, all municipalities really rely heavily on Massachusetts DOT guidance, and they really consider the first 3 warrants as the ones that are weighted the most heavily. The warrants do get into a variety of different scenarios. Really, for this situation, we most closely evaluated the 3 that were the most applicable. So this one was an 8-hour vehicle volume. We noted that it did not meet that criteria. We also looked at a 4-hour volume warrant. It did not meet that criteria. And the crash experience, it did not meet that criteria. But for traffic signals versus always stops, it gets into a lot more detail about specific volumes that are needed to consider the crash experience. So for traffic signal warrant specifically, in that warrant 7, it did not meet that crash experience warrant. So you can go ahead, David. And on the contrary, with the multi-stop control analysis, that has its own set of criteria and guidances. They're not really warrants per se, but there are a lot of different criterias that engineers should be studying very carefully to make a recommendation. So that said, I won't go through necessarily all of them because, as you can see, the majority of them were not met. But the one that was met was the fact that there are 5 or more reported crashes within a 12-month period. You can see that in multiple 12-month periods. So it did meet that criteria. That is one, that we consider just from a weighing standpoint to be very heavy and a very serious one. That if it's met, we really ought to consider an always stop. So we did highlight that was one that was met, and what ultimately is leading to at least DPW's recommendation. So you can move ahead, David. Of course, with that change, we want to be mindful of, what are the unintended consequences, what are the different considerations, things of that nature. So we did conduct a queue analysis. So we do have a traffic simulation software called Synchro, where we can take the data that we collected, like the turning movement counts, and plug that all in and see what the anticipated queues are. Sort of the standard order of operations is to most focus on the 95th percentile queue. So that's essentially like the worst 3 to 5 minutes, if you will, of the peak hour. So we did have that to look at and consider. Sometimes when you have a change, especially if you're adding a stop sign to what's considered a fairly major roadway, it is natural for it to then develop queues. And you want to be mindful of what are those queues and what effect they may have on the neighborhood overall. And a second point in all of this that has made this very interesting is that we do already have an existing rectangular rapid flashing beacon. That's the activated pedestrian light that's over there. We do have to adhere to federal highway laws. And unfortunately, those are currently prohibited at always stops or prohibited across stop controlled approaches. So should we move ahead with an always stop, the RRFB would have to come down. That said, with a stop sign regulation, that is something that forces vehicles to stop. And we know in Massachusetts state law, you do have to stop for pedestrians in a crosswalk. So we're not, sort of losing that pedestrian safety factor altogether by removing the RFB. So David, you can go ahead.
Right, and we're not actually losing the RFB itself, right? I know we're adding a lot of different RFBs in different parts of the city. We don't have to throw it away. We could just take that and use it again in a different location, right?
Absolutely. Yep. So the queuing, we did want to highlight that in this meeting. So again, this is what our software projects. Understanding the vehicle volume that was collected and looking at that 95th percentile queue again, really that worst like 3 to 5 minute stretch of the morning peak hour. You can see, you know, it's reaching some of the upstream and downstream intersections. So it's something to note. You know, our interpretation is this isn't an overwhelming queue. But of course, you know, folks are welcome to their own interpretations of that. So this is the AM one, and the next one, David, will be the PM one. Not entirely too dissimilar. And you can go ahead, David.
So what you're saying is we really don't expect the queues anywhere like beyond this based on the data that we collected, right? This is just showing what we think would be the worst couple minutes of the day.
Correct. That's what we anticipate based off the data that we have. You know, naturally things ebb and flow with traffic flow, but that's what we anticipate to be true the majority of the time for that 95th percentile queue. And we wanted to, you can click it one more time just so the data pops up, David. Let's see.
And let me do this.
Yeah, let's just have all of it on all together. So I stumbled upon some recent data that was collected at Winchester, Rachel, and Goddard, another location in Newton that has been an always stop since about 2016, 2017. It was really interesting to note that the vehicle volumes are very, very similar. That was, although I wasn't with the city at the time, my understanding is, you know, that was a pretty elaborate discussion as well. There were some similar concerns of queuing voiced at the time. Seeing as how similar vehicle volumes are, I think it's fair to look at the Winchester Street intersection as a good case study. And really, there have not been a lot of queuing concerns there to date. So I just thought it was, you know, something to note for the discussion as well. Go ahead, David.
Hi, on my keyboard, something's going on.
Go ahead.
Maybe I need to close that.
I think your keyboard may need cleaning, Dave.
Maybe. Okay, it did go to the right page, I think.
Gotcha. Yeah, so this slide really, I wanted to stop on it just for a moment. You know, moving to an always stop, of course, you know, can be a significant change, especially with the RFB there right now. So I just wanted to talk through some of the steps that DPW would take, assuming this is approved and not appealed or goes through the appeals process and maintains as an always stop. So we definitely would be alerting folks with electronic message boards in advance of the change. You know, we'd be looking at just highlighting the stop signs as much as possible. You know, the latest and greatest retroreflective sheeting that's available for aluminum signs, even the signposts, there's different sheeting as well. There are some existing like intersection advanced warning signs on Watertown Street right now that it would just make all the sense in the world to change to stop ahead warning signage. Of course, we'd have to replace some of the pavement markings that are there right now, such as removing the yield markings that really apply for the RFB and replacing those with stop bars. Of course, you know, with the RFB itself, you know, maybe just in the initial period, we might want to bag it, cover it, just so, you know, it's not immediately taken down, just for, you know, various considerations. But over time, it definitely would have to come down. Definitely, we cannot have it be operational, at least as soon as the stop signs are installed. And then the flex posts, we just think it'd be appropriate to remove them in that scenario. You know, we understand they have been a help for this specific situation with free flow traffic and having folks slow down and pay attention. With stop signs, we just want to make sure, you know, those aren't a distraction anymore, especially for a change of that nature. And, you know, of course, for winter times, it does make it easier to remove snow when we don't have these obstructions in the roadway. All set, David.
Okay. You know, I should have mentioned it before, but the third bullet where it says retroreflective sheeting seems a little technical. What is the sheeting? Is that just like the material on the stop sign, the red, or what is sheeting actually?
Yeah, so it's essentially just a thin material that we can apply. It's would be pretty similar to the material that's like stamped on the aluminum that creates the signs themselves. So we can take that same type of sheeting and install it on the signposts themselves. So, you know, our typical signposts are kind of like a very, you know, discreet, like black color. Like we don't really want it sticking out for any reason. That's not the focus of it. We want the sign to pop as much as possible. But in some cases, you can argue the red sheeting on signposts can just help a stop sign pop for the human eye that much more. So it is something that we recommend in this
So it's
scenario.
putting like the red on the pole itself in addition.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, definitely not a common thing, but something we were interested in doing here should this proceed. Yeah, so you know, we have the language ready to move ahead with that, but of course we want to open it up for the public and see what we're all thinking.
Okay, great. Thank you very, very much, Isaac. And, you know, so we're not going to move to public comment. I know that we already received 4 emails from nearby residents. I'm not going to read them all, but they're all supportive of moving forward with the 4-way stop signs. I already see that we have some hands up, so we'll start with the first one that I see, EJ Murray, I think.
Becky's been leading the charge, David. If you want to let Becky take the first pass at the collective
Yield to
community.
Becky Evans Mark, I guess.
Thank you, EJ, for that. So yes, thank you, Isaac, for the presentation. I think that the neighbors have been very patient. So I've been active for more than a decade advocating for these crashes, which are really, really intense. We are all motivated because we don't want someone to get killed. And we're tired of cars crashing through our fences and into our yards. And but we've been really patient. And so we've been advocating, and there's been slow movement, but these temporary measures of paint have come on all these levels, and increasingly, as you saw tonight, they haven't worked because now we've had the most accidents this year than we've ever had in another period. So we really need to move forward. And I think the 4-way stop, we've already seen some of the concerns in the I feel like Isaac's presentation was really helpful, but there were almost more slides about what the impact of the 4-way stop would be in terms of the longer queues. But what's there now, the latest and most effective temporary solution we've had is these yellow flex posts. They have their own issues, but they have created a de facto 4-way stop. So you're already getting those queues because drivers that are coming up Watertown are suddenly confused by all these yellow things and see people crossing. That's great. They slow down. Sometimes they even stop. And it's kind of miraculous when you're coming from Eddie or Elliott and people are stopping and allowing you to make a safe, slow turn. So I think we've all gotten a little bit used to it, and we can picture what this might look like, and that it would actually be really effective. So there's so much more I could say, but I think I'll leave it to that and let others speak. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And did you say what your address was?
Oh, sorry. I'm at 17 Elliott Avenue, 1517. It's a 2-family.
Okay. And I know that yours was one of the emails that we received.
Yes.
So thank you again. And can we move on to Sarah Nigo? Is it Sarah NGO?
Yes. Hello. Actually, this is actually Andrew Wardley. I'm over
And Peter now.
And Peter now. I'm over at their house. I'm at 50 Wedgwood, and this is my question. 50 Wedgwood, and you may have seen my emails in the past. One is, if there is going to be stop signs, right now they're on the west side of. There is no crosswalk. So we want to make sure that there's going to be 4 crosswalks. And also, I believe one of the reasons why there isn't a crosswalk now on the west side of Watertown Street is because there's no handicap / stroller ramps there. That's question one. And the other one, if I could ask another one, is just, had there been any consideration for bump outs to sort of choke the throat a little bit to make it easier for people to remove the chance of people passing on the right, which is currently being done, by the way, by these little whatever you call them, traffic poles. But is there any consideration to doing that? So there's like 2 parts to my question.
All right, I
Sure.
guess I can answer part of, oh, did you just want to answer that then, Isaac?
Yeah, I can answer
Okay.
all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're right. There is one leg of the Watertown Street approach that does not have a crossing right now. I think with an all-way stop, there is a stronger argument for having it now. I would just note that the existing ramps are a little bit sort of offset and would make it a little bit of an awkward crossing. But we'll definitely take a look at that. Paint's not, a high cost thing. So I would say that's definitely a consideration we can look at. And then as far as bump outs, we definitely understand, physically constructing what the Flexposts have been doing would have its host of benefits. It's really just a matter of funding. We do have this area of Watertown Street in our traffic calming evaluation. We do have a variety of other prioritization processes. So it's definitely something that will continue to be on our radar. I just want to say that if we do go to always stops, that does not preclude us from a future project. But it is a very reasonable, short-term, low-cost method that could really make a difference. So we can continue that discussion for future projects. We just can't vote on that per se tonight.
Right, and we can't vote on it because traffic council really doesn't have the authority. We don't have any funding. Like traffic council has no funding. I guess we could fund stop signs, but nothing that's any sort of bump out or significant cost. All we really do at traffic council is vote on changes to our parking and traffic regulations, including stop signs. We don't even vote on crosswalks. It's sort of in tandem, but it's not part of our vote.
Right.
So our next comment says Elizabeth Minnis. And we just need to know your address, please, and your name.
Hi, this is Louis Gadima with Elizabeth Minnis at 54 Wedgwood Road. So we're about a block and a half from this intersection, and we strongly support this measure and are glad that the Traffic Council is taking this up. As Becky put out, this is years past due. I would just make two quick points since there is so much support for this. One is that between West Newton Square and Watertown on Watertown Street, there are two minor intersections that don't have a lot of traffic because the streets on one side or the other don't go anywhere. And there are 11 major intersections. Of those 11, I believe it's 11, 10 have stoplights. Eddie Elliott is the only one that doesn't have any form of four-way stop. And so it is I don't know why it has been ignored for so long, but it is way past due to have this four-way stop there. And the only other thing that I would say is that in terms of the flex posts, I think the data shows that they've been counterproductive. We've had more accidents in the first 9 months of this year than any previous 12-month year. And so I'm glad they're coming down. And that we won't be seeing them again. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. Next, I'm going to call on Louis. If you could say your name and address, please. Unmute. So you need to unmute. We can't hear you.
Hi, I'm Louis Tamian. I live at 11 Elliott Ave. I'm the house on the corner with this intersection. And I fully support the four-way stop. I think the posts have done a lot to slow down traffic. And I think the stopping is going to also help. And one of the things that I'm surprised that we're getting more accidents, because one of the problems we had with the current or the prior setup was that cars, when they stopped to let somebody go in front of them, other cars would go around along the curb and shoot past them and oftentimes hit another vehicle. So what I would like to see, instead of a bump out to control the flow of traffic, to put an island, and a small island as you approach the intersection, like you have done on Waltham Street, because what it does is it prevents that car from zipping around a stopped car, but having a bump out would also get in the way of bicyclists. And I thought maybe having the island would allow bicyclists to continue without having to deal with the bump out. And that's what I'd like to express. And I appreciate all the effort people have done in going into this, especially Becky and Isaac.
Thank you for that comment. I would just, reply that, again, bump outs or islands are forms of traffic calming that have a cost associated with it and is not under the jurisdiction of traffic council. So we're at the meeting today. All that we're considering at this point is stop signs. So if they are approved, we'll be able to monitor and see how it's going, and then see if there's anything else that, might be needed through a separate process. Would you agree with that, Isaac?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely appreciate folks' advocacy for more traffic calming. Like I said, we have an annual evaluation and prioritization we do for that. We have a lot of demands for the funding that's available there. I think, this location and others, it'd be great to see a project here one day. So, if we're to move ahead with stop signs, that definitely doesn't mean that we'll never look at this again. It just means that some of the other ideas take a lot more effort and funding. So, we'll see if we can get there. But this is definitely a good next step, I would say.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Isaac. So the next one I see is Paolo H. Alves back.
Hi, I just very briefly would like to add a couple points. First of all, we are both supportive, and we actually thank Julia Maliki for bringing the topic. I think it's a very important measure to have this four-way stop. And sorry, I forgot to mention, we live at 803 Watertown Street, so I actually have a very good perspective because my home office is literally in front of this intersection. And it's actually important to say ahead of the vote that even though we see 6 reported accidents, I've seen plenty of fender benders and other accidents that I'm sure don't make into the statistics because they don't call the police. But I've seen plenty of near misses, and we're not talking about, parking problems. We're talking about people potentially dying because cars are hitting them on a sidewalk. So that's one thing that I would like to mention. And two other small points that I would also like to say. One is I'm actually disappointed that I'm seeing the flex posts going. I disagree with an opinion earlier that they're not helping. I actually think that they're helping quite a lot. And again, I'm literally looking at Watertown from my window now, and I can see that they work as visual deterrents to cars that oftentimes drive way too fast at Watertown Street. And just having that as a visual deterrent to pedestrians is something that I've noticed that is a way to avoid potential fatal injuries. And the other point that I would love to understand a little bit better, if that's the only condition for the four-way stop to move forward is removing those, or if it's possible to maybe through a trial period keep the posts, see how it works. And the other point that I would like to ask is the flashing beacons are also helpful, and understand that it's a regulation that they cannot be there. But I wonder if it's a possibility to move it down one street, because there aren't a lot of places that you can cross in the Watertown area. And so even if you have to go down, a few feet to cross it would be very beneficial. Those are my questions. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure thing.
For that comment. Isaac, did you want to respond or no?
Yeah, sure thing. Apologies if I go out of order. So yeah, for moving the RFB, we do have an RFB evaluation also. So, I'm sure we have the crosswalks that are currently uncontrolled and don't have any device along Watertown Street on there right now. You know, we do prioritize it in a very similar fashion as traffic calming. You know, we look at the data, especially if there are crashes, you know, what are the pedestrian generators in the area. So I think it's a great idea. But you know, from DPW standpoint, we're going to rely on our prioritization for where some of the next locations might be. But I definitely note your comment and understand your point there. For the flex posts, you know, I think it is a matter of opinion here. And I think some of the varying opinions are all good and noted. You know, we feel that, you know, we really want to emphasize a change of that caliber to an always stop, and we don't want anything distracting from it. So, and also, you know, if this is approved and goes through the appeal period, we probably, when it comes down to installing this, we probably already won't be too far from the winter. We know we did keep them up last winter. As neighbors probably saw, it can be pretty difficult to maintain that in the winter. And we were actually kind of lucky last winter, honestly. We didn't really have too much snow, and we'll see what happens this year. So it would be our opinion to try it without the flex posts first. But maybe there is some happy medium in the future where some come back and it's sort of less so, and it's not as dense. So that can be a conversation we continue outside of here for sure. But I don't want to take away from the stop sign conversation.
Thank you, Isaac. The next person is Rich Heald.
Hi, Rich Heald, 45 Elliott Avenue. I too just want to echo strong support for the proposal that others, and a thanks to both Becky, Paolo, the residents who've been very effective voices, Julia for bringing this forward, and Isaac and city staff. Much appreciated. One question or comment related, and this is more anecdotal, your data may provide a clear insight of this. It seemed in the last maybe 2 years, the traffic coming west, so where you were heading west, where you were showing your longest queue, seems to travel at speeds I don't remember. I've actually been past coming off the Albemarle intersection on the left side going, 25, 30 miles an hour to speed. There had cars getting around me, almost like they're racing up to the square. I think the signage you're proposing when this goes into effect is smart. We certainly don't want people but I don't know if there's other tools in the toolkit. I don't know if we use blinking stoplights, maybe either solar or traffic indicated, but I am a little worried that in that transitional period, as folks get used to this, you'd mentioned the highly reflective. I would encourage the city to take every possible means to ensure that those Watertown cars are aware this is happening, which hopefully does happen with support of and funding through the city. But thank you for the time, and thank you again for, it has been, I think I testified at a hearing like this more than a decade ago, so it's nice to see a lot of movement in the last couple of years.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you. So the next person is EJ Murray.
Thanks, David. Curious if when the traffic data was taken, and I think that's directed more towards Isaac. I was curious as to when we pulled that data.
Yeah, so those were in early December. They were on work days. Typical volume collection days are Tuesdays to Thursdays. That tends to be the most consistent days. We don't see a lot of change in traffic between those 3 days versus like a Monday or Friday or a weekend, of course.
Sure.
So that was all around the sort of early to mid-December timeframe.
Okay. I think with the additional 200 units in Newtonville, and I think a lot of traffic is trying to avoid West Newton with the bottleneck that is at this point, and we're seeing a lot of traffic through our neighborhoods. Curious if maybe one way on Eddy into Elliott is something that the council would consider, or potentially speed bumps as well as an additional kind of action to slow traffic down into that intersection. Just some thoughts. I've been at 16 Eddy Street for 20 years now, and this has been going on. I've been a first responder to a number of pretty serious accidents, and obviously this community's come together around this effort because we're all very concerned and want everybody safe. So I appreciate all the consideration.
Yeah, no, understood. Yeah, that the continued advocacy for traffic calming methods, whether it's bump outs, islands, speed bumps, we definitely understand that. There's a good discussion to be had there. It's just one that unfortunately Traffic Council again can't vote on. The DPW has its prioritization process. We have data on Elliott. We have data on Watertown Street. We do have a queue where we continue to collect more data. So a change like this, definitely won't stop us from collecting more data and seeing, what are the changes. But those projects take funding and has to be prioritized. So we wouldn't be able to necessarily have that discussion here right now. But one ways, it is something that we heard. We felt that the always stop would be the most effective first step. With changes in directionality like one ways, that of course needs to be studied carefully and sort of very inclusionary of the folks that are affected by it. Like, for example, if you're a resident nearby and you can't as easily get to your home and you're rerouted because of that, that's a very life-changing consideration, and we just want to make sure that's a collaborative discussion. There sometimes is the sentiment with changes like that of, are we just moving the problem elsewhere if we make changes like that? So it wasn't something that we recommended at this time. It is something that we heard. It's not this wild, gross idea or anything like that. Maybe that it's a future next step. But I would say, if folks are amenable, let's try the always stop, and see what happens after that with other changes through Traffic Council.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, as you know, Eddy's the biggest cross street, and it's a pathway to 95. Everybody that comes out of that area goes out. Out that direction, and it's the path of least resistance and the highest speed for sure. People fly down Eddy Street. A perch.
For example, right? Like, for example, this just an example. Like, if you had it one way heading away from Watertown Street, even just for the first block, that means a lot of folks are turning down Albemarle and affecting those neighbors. So yes, you're solving an issue somewhere, but potentially creating another one elsewhere. So that's a careful, conversation to have. And we want to include a lot of those folks that probably aren't on this meeting right now.
Just talking out loud, did a lot of the accidents happen as traffic came down Elliott into Watertown, or was there a greater portion coming up Eddy into Watertown? Because I think that there's a pretty tricky stop sign right in front of right at the end of Elliott Street that a number of people have missed over the years, and then Watertown's a really fast street, so those accidents are pretty dramatic.
Yeah, no, you're right to point that out. The split's actually pretty even between vehicles exiting Eddy Street versus Elliott Street that collide with Watertown Street vehicles. But you're right, just from a sightline perspective, there is a tree that's pretty poorly, unfortunately, positioned right at the Elliott Ave stop sign approaching Watertown Street. But of course, with an always stop, the sightline concerns are much less so.
Brilliant. I appreciate the time and consideration to the council, to you, Isaac. Thank you, everybody that's involved.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I was going to make a comment on the one way as well, but I realize we have several other items after this one, and I want to be respectful to everyone waiting for the next couple items. So I do see Mary Walsh, if you would like to unmute yourself and tell us your address.
I'm Mary Walsh Hurley, and I'm at 59 Elliott Ave, and I've been a more than 40-year resident of Elliott Ave, and I can tell you that every single time I've approached that intersection, it's been a Hail Mary pass, and I'm delighted to see this change, and I appreciate all the people, Becky, and all of the people that have been involved in this, and am very appreciative that City Hall is responding the way they are. So I endorse it heartily. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that comment. Counselor Maliki, did you want to make a comment? And you need to unmute.
Oh, I was going to say, I was going to go after the residents are done.
So, okay. So we still see Sarah Ingo.
Yeah, this is Peter No at 42 Elliott. I also just wanted to thank the council and all those involved and express our support for this measure. I did have one question. Historical data, at least in Newton or other places, what do you expect to see from a four-way stop as far as reduction in accidents in situations like these? And is there also an effect on the total volume of cars, for example, coming down Elliott and Eddy as a cut through? Will that potentially decrease because of this four-way stop that might force them or make it better to just take one of the bigger roads like Washington?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. That's really interesting. When you do go to an always stop, studies do find that the number of crashes may remain, but they may just change in nature and severity, which is a really important piece of this. Like, for example, we understand the angle collisions are really, those are terrible collisions, right? That's what's happening there right now. Some of the collisions that you see after an always stop is more of the like rare end types. It might be folks not paying attention, or whatever it may be, but those are a lot less severe. So it's sort of, if we are picking between the two, we would understand that rare end collisions are preferred if we have to have a collision that is over an angle one. So I would expect a total reduction in crashes, but not completely gone altogether. Just understanding that unfortunately new stop signs can yield some rare end collisions from time to time. Sorry, what was the other?
The other was does it?
Oh yes.
Decrease volume through the intersection.
Yep. I don't think this would be a change in volume necessarily for Eddy and Elliott. What they do at the intersection remains the same. They still have to stop. It's just, of course, much safer for them to then proceed through. But the Watertown Street side of it is an interesting one. That's where we do want to, that's why we collected the data and ran the queue analysis. If there are substantial queues in some of these type of discussions, yes, we do fear that sometimes folks approach the intersection, see a long queue and say, hey, you know what, I can go down whatever side street to get around. But in this case, our data showed and what we simulated and what we anticipate are not overwhelming queues. Yes, greater queues than there are now, but not overwhelming. So I don't anticipate a major change to how folks operate on Watertown Street as far as how they disperse. I think most folks will stay on Watertown Street, but of course just have to come to a full stop.
All right. Interesting. Thank you, Isaac. Is there anyone else from the public that would like to comment on this before
David,
we go to the city
David,
council?
there's Anne Marie Kilalia has his hand raised.
Okay. If you could please unmute yourself and say your name and address.
My name is Joe Killalite. I live at 789 Watertown Street. I am the driveway that's going to be in the queue. So I kind of disagree a little bit with that because I see longer queues than that right now. Okay. I do appreciate all the work that everyone has done. Like PH said, there's more accidents that happen where people, little fender benders and bang into each other, and those aren't reported because we hear them all the time on Watertown Street. So that goes on. And like I said, I've been here 28 years. So I do want to thank everybody for all the work that's being done. My big question would be that people going eastbound on Watertown Street, taking a left on Eddy Street, when you take those poles out, there's going to be, I believe, a lot of people they're gonna slide right into that lane and I think that's where you're gonna see some problems. Okay, just because my front porch watches that. So if I'm out there, like I said, I've seen it for 28 years.
Okay, yeah, that can be something to keep an eye on for sure.
Thank you for that. Anyone else from the public before we go on to the counselors? All right. Thank you all for all these great comments and the emails, and for pushing this forward. We all appreciate you. And we're going to call on Councilor Maliki now.
Yes, yeah, I'd like to thank all the neighbors, especially for organizing that early morning and rush hour evening in the rain party on the corner there. I just was wondering if there's some way to make the Watertown Street stop signs, particularly since they will be new, make them like really hard to miss. There was an intersection in Lowell, which we actually did a story on with the Lowell Sun, and I did the pictures with that had the perimeter of the stop sign had little flashing lights, and I don't know if it was solar powered or what. Is that something we have at all in Newton, and something that could be considered to make these really hard to miss? And also I echo the desirability of having those, stop sign ahead, whatever. So there's like the warning and then the stop sign.
Yeah, we do have 2 locations with the LED blinking stop signs. They are more expensive, of course. So we're not ready to commit to them right now. At those 2 locations, there were already existing stop signs, and unfortunately, there continued to be substantial crash history despite the stop signs for some amount of years. And that was how that got prioritized to find the funding for those installations. So obviously, I don't want to rule it out for the future. I think those are neat devices, but we probably can't move ahead with that right away. But we have some other tactics, such as what I put in the previous slides, just about the red sheeting and doubling signs and the advanced warning signs and the electronic message boards, and honestly, probably even some police enforcement, at least early on, that I didn't put on there. But a good discussion to have.
Yeah, that was another question I was going to ask for Captain Doucette. Can there be some enforcement until people get used to this and there's enough awareness that people stopping make other people stop?
Yeah, we can address that.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Louis, if you could say your name and address, please. So I see someone named Louis who has their hand up. Okay.
Hi, Louis Atamian, 11 Elliott Avenue. One of the things that's been a problem, and I see you're anticipating that people are going to need a transition time to get used to this. I think some people miss the stop signs as they are already. Is there a way to at least temporarily put a flashing light hanging in the middle of the intersection, flashing in both directions red? Thank you.
Apologies. Unfortunately, those are of great cost. So we would not be able to do that at this time.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else from the public that wishes to speak at this time? Anyone else? Now's the last chance to raise your hand and be called on.
I see Jeremy, David.
Yep, yeah, I know Jeremy. Jeremy's a member of Traffic Council. Anyone else from the public, though? Okay, so thank you all for your comments. I'm going to go to Jeremy.
Yep, thanks. So I think Isaac, you hit on something interesting earlier when you were talking about the types of crashes that might either persist or actually increase with an always stop. And I did try to look at the data quickly for Winchester, Rachel, and Goddard. And I did see still some angle crashes and obviously rear end crashes. I don't know, did you get a chance to really kind of dig into that and see? Again, I think your intuition might be right that overall things are less severe, even if it's the same number, but I don't know if you can speak a little bit more to that, might be helpful.
Yeah, I have to apologize. I didn't take a deep dive into the crash history at Winchester Goddard. That one sort of a light bulb went off for me more so about the queuing standpoint of that one. So sounds like just in your initial look through, maybe my point was pretty spot on, maybe, hopefully. Just as far as like acknowledging, yes, perhaps there are some crashes that maintain, but at least the severity of them go down greatly. And there may be some more rear ends versus angles.
Yeah, that's helpful. Again, I apologize for not kind of flagging that like a couple weeks ago for you to actually have time to look into it. But I guess I mean that's fine. But I guess one other question, which is kind of always on my mind with this type of stuff, and it's not always the most popular thing to say, but how easy is it to go back on a change like this and say we want to go back to a two-way stop?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know how to measure that. Some of it is just sort of really documenting what the existing concerns were. That's why the amount of analysis and sort of work we put into the memo is helpful, so that we can always harp back onto that if there are some new type of concerns. But yeah,
I guess I'm thinking more just in terms of driver behavior. Driver behavior is kind of sticky. I anticipate some transition problems going into the four-way stop. Again, if something happens where we want to go back, again, it's kind of the same thing where driver behavior is sticky. So I just wanted to raise that. Obviously, it's hard to predict, but just wanted to kind of get that out there and have it be said. But anyway, thanks.
Yeah, no, I get it. I guess I'm optimistic in the sense that the Winchester Goddard one's still there. And I think anecdotally the neighborhood was very much in support of that change and continues to be. So hopefully that's a really good apples to apples comparison.
Thanks.
Good, thank you. All right, I think we are down to Councilor Downs.
Thank you, Chair Kozis. So this is really an appalling corner, and I'm going to support the changes. However, I heard some things that I do think are true, and that is that we will still need to narrow the intersection somehow, perhaps not with as many flex posts for the time being, but for some, because I suspect there's a lot of bad driver behavior of going around stopped cars on the right or on the left. And I'd like to see us just make this that much safer if we can. I also saw that the rectangular rapid flashing beacon is going away. I understand that's because of the warrants. I'm hoping we can reuse that.
Yep.
I've had a second report of somebody almost being hit at the crosswalk at Parker and Hagen, which is on a school route. And four-way stops sometimes, just so you know, because we have a lot of them in our neighborhood, are basically a yield, but it does slow down your approach. So that is, I wouldn't expect full compliance at the four-way stops, but it does force people to stop and look, or at least slow down and look. So I'll be supporting this, but I will also be expecting to hear from folks on Eddy and Watertown and Elliott, because these are very wide streets that do go places, and I expect we'll be hearing more requests for traffic calming just because of the nature of the beast here. And I will be supporting further traffic calming here to make it safer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mitch.
I'll be supporting this proposal. The only comment I'd make, since the issue of Winchester and the cross street came up, Rachel and Winchester. I mean, that's a four-way intersection. It works. Although just a couple of days ago, somebody decided to go through without stopping. So I assume that must happen every so often. But it also works because the the eye contact between the four drivers who are, in the stop area sometimes is needed. Sometimes the driver will, allow a car to go by. And I guess I wonder, not that I'm against the four-way at Watertown, but I wonder if that kind of behavioral is possible, and if not, maybe there's some other way of making it safer. But again, I think probably an activity over 6 months or more will probably help us shape if there's any remedial action needed.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, I think we are done with the public comments. So thank you all again, and we are at the point asking for a motion. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll move this.
Okay, so we have a motion made by Councilor Downs to approve the language of TPR 902 to create a four-way stop at this intersection. Any last comments? Okay, good. Danielle, can you please call the roll?
Mr. Fishman,
Aye.
Captain Doucette,
Aye.
Mr. Kosis,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
Counselor Downs.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved 5-0.
Thank you. All right, so we just need to wait until October 11th, make sure there's no appeal. And then after October 11th is where we will start seeing the changes occurring. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on then to our next item. Let's see. Okay. All right. Still having problems with my keyboard. So our next item is TC 4323. It's Councilor Humphrey on behalf of residents requesting to change the parking regulations on the south side of Longfellow Road to include the south side of the circle and cul-de-sac from a 1 hour limit to a 1 hour limit except by resident permit. So this item is going to be very similar to what we heard before along Allerton. Here's Longfellow Road, sort of sandwiched in between Newton Wellesley Hospital and the Green Line at Woodland. You can see that the street is a dead end. There's a cul-de-sac at the end and sort of this circle in the middle. And then there's Longwell Avenue, which is a private way. So here's a view looking from Washington Street down Longfellow Road to the east. Here's a view for a little bit further down looking to the east. This is near that circle in the middle of the road. And then a view near Longwell Road near the end, looking down toward the cul-de-sac. So the existing parking regulations are that parking is prohibited on the north side of Longfellow Road and a small section of the south side close to Washington Street. And then it's a 1 hour limit, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on the south side. The 1 hour limit's been there for a long time. It's because of its location near Newton Wellesley Hospital and the Green Line. So our recommendation here is, as was requested by the residents, to keep the current regulations and to add a resident permit override. So we would be basically removing the current regulations and adding them back with the addition of a resident permit program for the residents who live on the street. They would be able to, anyone who abuts Longfellow Road would be able to get a resident permit sticker from the Traffic Bureau for $25 per year and up to 2 free visitor placards, which are the transferable cardboard placards. Maybe not cardboard, but the paper placards. So that is, and this we're sort of also clarifying that the 1 hour limit is on the south side, including the outside of the circle and and I can't read this, and the southern half of the cul-de-sac. The southern half of the cul-de-sac would be a 1 hour limit. The northern half would be part of the north side of the street where parking is prohibited. So that is our recommendation, and we're going to move on to public comment for this item. If you could raise your hand and we'll call on you.
Not seeing any.
Okay, I'm not seeing any either.
No.
Oh,
Okay, so Councilor Downs.
Thank you, Chair. So this is very familiar to me. It is in Ward 5, fairly. It is also where my brother lives. And I was just there and met with the residents last week, I believe. It's exactly as you described, and it's getting annoying to them that they can't leave their car out for more than an hour. Most of them, all of them have driveways where their cars can be accommodated, but some of them are tandem driveways. Sometimes you forget. So I would recommend approval of this, and I will move it unless we have further discussion.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion by Councilor Downs to approve the language of TPR 903 to add the resident permit. I do see that we have a hand up by for Merritt Row. If you could unmute yourself and just say your name and address, please.
I'm actually Merritt Rose Smith's wife, Bronwyn Melquist, live at 17 Longfellow Road. And my question is, why is this only being considered for the cul-de-sac on? We have been trying, the whole of Longfellow Road has been trying to get resident stickers for many years, and we were denied. And which is one of the reasons the 1 hour parking came in, because of the hospital parking fee evaders. So I'm not opposed to this. I'm in favor of it, but I would like it to be considered for the whole of Longfellow Road.
So that is the recommendation. That is the recommendation.
Oh, that's not how I read it. Sorry.
So what the recommendation is, currently the whole south side of Longfellow Road, you can see in red here, the whole south side, the restriction right now says 1 hour limit, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Starts a point 100 feet east of Washington Street. There's a little no parking zone, but then after 100 feet, the whole south side is a 1 hour limit. The recommendation is to remove that restriction and instead have a 1 hour limit on the whole south side, starting from the same point, 100 feet east of Washington Street, still being a 1 hour limit. The signs would say 1 hour limit except by resident permit. So that is that is the entirety.
That is the entire street. All right.
Yes, yes.
That was not clear in the announcement I read.
Okay.
But can I just add another thing not really pertaining to this is the enforcement of regulations. The 5 feet driveway ban, nobody is paying attention to that. And what I'm concerned is why it's always up to the residents to report this. Nobody's enforcing it. We have people blocking our driveway 2-3 times a month, and we're the ones that have to call enforcement to have that looked at. So that's just a little pet peeve and wanted to pass it on. But thank you for listening.
Well, yeah, I would just respond by saying, it is enforced. We in our division, we do handle the parking ticket appeals and the parking ticket hearings. A lot of them are for people who get ticketed for, parking within 5 feet of a driveway. I think the issue is that we only have, I don't even know, like 10 or 11 parking control officers in the whole, and they're enforcing the entire city, every single street in the city. So they do issue the tickets if they see that someone is parked within 5 feet of the driveway, but they don't drive on every single street, every day. So in addition to their regular monitoring, the way to add additional enforcement is through public calling the traffic bureau.
Well, I'm being referred to as a Karen because I call so often, but anyway, thank you.
Thank you very much. Jeremy?
Yep, thanks, David. Just while we had the slide up, I just happened to notice that I think there's a typo under the very last line on the slide should be 100 feet, not 110, unless I'm misunderstanding it.
Yeah. You're right.
Yeah, again, not a big
Let's
deal, but just because
see,
we
I
had
just
this, we
wanna
had the
see
slide
if-
up, so.
Let me see. And it's also the same error. You're very good at finding these errors, Jeremy. It's the same error that we see on the draft TPR 903. So I'm going to change that to 100 and I'm going to cross out 110. Do you see where that is, Danielle? The very last line, Longfellow Road, south side from a point 100 feet east of Washington Street to end. That goes in section 202, TPR 202. Does everyone understand that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a huge deal because I think no one's enforcing TPR 202 separately from TPR 176 anyway, but it just
Yeah,
helps
we
to have it
might as well
clean.
get it correct when
Yep.
we're voting. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we already have a motion on the table to approve the language of TPR 903 with this one edit, 100 feet east of Washington Street, right? Any last comments? Okay, Danielle, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Fishman,
Aye.
Captain Doucette,
Aye.
Mr. Kosis,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
and Counselor Downs.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved 5-0, TPR 903.
Okay, great. So just like just like what we talked about for Allerton, once we get through the appeals period, once we pass October 11th and the signs get changed, probably we need to order, I'm not sure if we need to order new signs or if there's stickers that we can put on the existing signs. But once the new signs are posted that say, except, the 1 hour limit, except by resident permit, that's the cue to go to the traffic bureau to be able to buy your sticker or get your free visitor passes. Okay, great. Thank you. Next item is TC 4023. This is Adrian Alaya, traffic engineer, requesting changes to the parking regulations on the north side of Ward Street between West Boulevard and Ashford Road to reflect changes due to sidewalk and ramp reconstruction. Okay, so for this item, this is the block that we're talking about of Ward Street. It's right in front of Temple Emmanuel. Here's a view looking toward looking from West Boulevard toward the east, toward Center Street. Here's a view looking toward Ashford Road. You can see the new ramps that were, the new curb cuts that were installed, and the new accessible ramp and entrance. So the reason that this was docketed is because there were some changes to the area right in front of Temple Emmanuel, where a new accessible ramp was installed and an accessible curb cut. So this top image, actually, it's not even the existing conditions anymore. This is sort of before the reconstruction. And this, where it says proposed conditions, that's what we have on the ground now. Because we improved the access right in front, we needed to make some changes. We needed to move the accessible spaces from where they had been for many years to get them closer to where the accessible ramp is now. So there's still 3 accessible spaces. They're just moved a little bit to the east. The blue zone needed to be shortened from what it was before to what it will be. And then the area where we had previously these 3 accessible spaces, the accessible spaces aren't there anymore, and the area is converted just to unrestricted parking. So these are just sort of updating our traffic and parking regulations to reflect the conditions that have changed. Okay. And yeah, go ahead, Isaac. Did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'll just comment just sort of for on the record. These changes came together pretty quickly. The city had to do sidewalk work on Ward Street And it wanted to get it all done in August before September, so we of course wouldn't interfere with any of the high holidays and the various events at the temple. And we did run a lot of plans by the temple, and they were very amenable to these changes. So we're a little bit here after the fact in this scenario, but just want to make sure that our books reflect how it's working today.
Thank you, Isaac. Okay, so here's our existing parking regulations, which we are making some changes. Our recommendation is to update the language to reflect the existing, the new conditions. And here is the technical language that we need to vote on. And so with that, I'm going to make a motion to approve the language of TPR 904 as shown on slide 61. Did anyone have any questions or comments before we vote? Okay, seeing none. Danielle, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Fishman,
Aye.
Captain Doucette,
Aye.
Mr. Kosis,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
and Counselor Downs.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved 5-0.
Okay, good. And our last item. So our last item is TC 4723. Isaac Prezant, City Transportation Engineer. You're actually traffic engineer, is that right? City traffic engineer?
I don't know anymore.
Okay. Anyway, you're requesting to approve a stop sign at the Clifton Road northbound approach to Hartman Road. So here's the location near the Memorial Spalding School. This is a T intersection. Right now, there is no stop sign at that location. This is the view looking toward Hartman Road. So when we get requests like this, which we get almost every traffic council meeting, we recognize that there's no official warrants. It is an applied stop. This is a T intersection. You're supposed to be stopping. We are not required to add a stop sign, but we could if we think it would be helpful. And traffic council, usually we do view it as beneficial, especially if it's near a school, if there's students that are walking nearby or biking nearby, if there's any sort of issue with sight lines. So it does clarify the right of way, of course. So we usually do recommend approval, and we are recommending approval here as well to add the stop sign at this T intersection. And here is the language that we would need to vote on. So that is the presentation for this item. And I will go ahead and make the motion to approve the language of TPR 905 to add the stop sign at the end of Clifton Road northbound at Hartman Road. And we can open it up for any comments or questions. Okay, seeing none. Danielle, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Fishman,
Aye.
Captain Doucette,
Aye.
Mr. Kosis,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
and Counselor Downs.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved 5-0, TPR 905.
All right, so that concludes our business.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, we are adjourned. Our next meeting will be October 26th. That's 4 weeks from today. Thank you all and have a good
Thank you
night.
all.
Okay, bye-bye.